Welcome back to Myth Mental Health. My name is Justin A.Williams, and I'm the author of Reborn Virtues Constellation, which you can get online at Amazon.com and Barnes & Nobles and other places online where books are sold all over the world. So today what we're going to talk about is, and I've been thinking about how I wanted to mix things up a little bit. We usually talk about specific characters in myth or specific tropes and themes. Today I just wanted to talk about the whole gamut of one mythology. And as much as I could, this is probably going to be a two-parter. So today we're going to talk about Egyptian mythology, right? So what makes Egyptian mythology something that can be crucial for us today as we go about our daily lives, trying to improve ourselves, trying to solve problems, trying to do much of what ancient Egyptians were trying to do, which is just live the best life that we possibly can. Now, in Egyptian mythology, or let's say the ancient Egyptian religion, some people like to say Kemet as well, what was so essential was that you understood that this life was just a phase, right? People like to say today about the Matrix and how life is really some 3D, 5D reality and all those things. That might be substantial, but the Egyptians were really the first ones to ever say anything like that. As a Christian, if you're watching this, you may relate to that, saying, well, in Christianity it teaches that in Christianity, in a sense, that this life is really setting you up for where you're going to go eternally. But the Egyptians had a little bit of a different take in terms of what it meant to pass through to the other side, right? In this life, you need to be a moral person. What was morality? Well, they had 36, I believe, or 42, I think it was 36 negative commandments. Now, what does that mean? It's no different than saying a commandment like thou shalt not kill or thou shalt not commit adultery. But they said these confessions, would be that you'd go before the king of the afterlife, who is Osiris, who is also called the king of love or justice. And he would listen to you as you said, I have not stolen. So that's a confession, right? I have not committed false witness against another. Basically, I have not lied. And you go through these steps saying, okay, well, here's a checklist. And if you can confess that you haven't done anything, you're in a good spot, right? You're a moral person. Now you might be asking, well, what's the threat, right? In some ways, people believe that humans always need a deterrent. And the deterrent is, in this case, that if your heart was measured on the scale by Anubis, who was either the son of Set or son of Osiris, and it was heavier than a feather, the feather of Ma'at, who represented justice. If it was heavier than that, that meant the weight of sin. That means the way you're guilting yourself, the way you're carrying the trauma and how you inflicted that on others, right? It's not just being sad. It's not one of those things where you necessarily don't believe in the Egyptian gods, right? Like, you wouldn't be an Egyptian and say, I don't believe in the gods and that's why I'm going to go into some form of hell. That wouldn't be an option. You wouldn't recognize any other gods that existed, but if you heard of gods in other systems, like a Zeus or a Marduk, that would somehow be translated for you. It's different than in Christianity and monotheistic Abrahamic religions. Abrahamic religions tend to say all other gods don't exist outside my system, but as an Egyptian religion, you would say, no, your Zeus is really my Nut, Geb, right? It's a male earth deity. Your Zeus is really my Osiris, being the king, or Ra, right? They would translate it. So that, if you're wondering, oh, well, what if you were an atheist, right? What if you were agnostic? That concept would not really be relevant. Once you got to the underworld, it would be very clear that Osiris is the god that exists. And if you go to the confessions and your heart is lighter than the feather of Ma'at, then you would pass into Rostro, which is the afterlife, where basically you would do the same tasks as your earthly life, but you'd be in a better place. You wouldn't feel pain, you wouldn't feel hunger. You may eat, you may drink, you may revel, you may even possibly work out. Whatever you did in your daily life that you enjoyed, you will repeat again. There's evidence of people who died having farming tools by their sarcophagi or what they were buried in. or what they are entombed in. And this is evidence that we think shows that people thought they just continued their daily activities. Now, if you were a bad person, if you were immoral, if I don't know how much of the negative confessions you needed to have actually offended, but if you were a bad person, you'd go into Amit, the devourer, which would be oblivion. It's very unclear as to if they think that oblivion is an actual place where a person would just subsist. Remember, Egyptians usually believe that the soul is eternal and that there's different parts of the soul. But some people might interpret this to mean that really you have a soul, but that soul does not become codified as eternal until you get to rostro in the afterlife that you'd want to be in. If you go into Amit the devourer and you're immoral, maybe that you're not given the seal of approval, and then your soul definitely is forfeit, and you become soil or the basic element of life. You just get degraded into disintegrated, which can be very depressing when you think about it. So Egyptian mythology also has a lot of stories that talk about the relationship between lovers. If you look at the torn apart lovers of Geb and Nut, how they are kind of separated as the sky and earth, constantly revolving and peering at each other, but never in touch, really, never being able to be one with each other again. You find that in myth, usually with the sun and the moon, but the sky and the earth can have that dichotomy, that dynamic as well. It's different than Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, with Ouranos, the sky, and Gaia, the earth, cantankerous relationship, or at least the ending of that. The Geb and Nut are lovers that peer at each other. Love is a very central theme in Egyptian religion. And it's very similar to kind of how we look at love. Romantic is possible. So is the love between family, the love between friends. Love is seen as something that transcends all. In the beginning, Atum is described as a loving being that, in an act of self-love, creates the world, because Atum is alone, and thus creates the first gods and the heavens and everything like that. There's also the story of Osiris and Isis, which is a story of tremendous love, but we want to use the version here that slanders Set. And I'm not slandering Set because I think Set was understood as an evil character for most of ancient Egypt's existence. For most of ancient Egypt's existence, up until about the inception, after the Hyksos invade, and we have the New Kingdom. Before that, Set is a bold warrior character, much like how Ares is seen in the Mycenaean age. Ares is at first described by Hesiod and Homer as a glorious, courageous defender of urbanism, of cities. And Set is described as the defender of Ra. He's the one who makes sure that Ra does not get destroyed by Apophis, which is the epitome of the great evil in the world, the great evil serpent that will devour creation if Ra doesn't hold it at bay day and night. Set is the only one, not Osiris, not Isis, as Hathor, as powerful as they are in their stories, and we'll talk about that, they are very powerful in their stories. It is Set who wins the day over Apophis, and his reward, kind of the rest of Egyptian history, once the Hyksos, or foreign invaders, come in, or maybe they didn't understand Set, maybe they had different beliefs on good and evil, maybe they were approaching kind of proto Zoroastrianism, where they wanted to have a greater dichotomy between the good and the bad. They slander Set as a bottom feeder, the one who dwells and delights in misery and trickery and darkness as a bad thing, and chaos, the desert, the foreign god. Right? Osiris rises up in the priestly class to be the god of the chosen ones, the good one, the just one, the loving one. But let's get to the story. So in the story, this version that I'm going to tell, which is, you can find it anywhere on the internet, Osiris has an affair with Nephthys, who Nephthys is the wife of Set, who finds Set ugly, as many people do. She disguises herself as Osiris's wife Isis and sleeps with Osiris. Now, in the Egyptian understanding, you might be a little confused by this. Remember, Osiris is seen as a god of sight and vision. Nothing really hides from Osiris. So how is she able to disguise herself? Tricky, right? You might think maybe Osiris at a certain point kind of just said, oh, well, whatever. But Set is furious. And Set with 72 of his followers. Now, if you inspire loyal following, these followers are not necessarily evil to want revenge against Osiris for their lord Set. And Set, being aggrieved, probably understandably wants this, but he is slandered even more after the story comes out because he tricks Osiris into climbing into a box perfectly fit for his dimensions. And in this box, Osiris will stay. And he stays and dies, and eventually his body is ripped apart by Set into 14 pieces, and Isis has to travel the world to find it, but she does. She has this kind of sense that no matter what happens to Osiris, I will never leave him, I will never forsake him. No matter what has happened, I'm his wife, and I will be dutiful, and I will try to save his soul. I don't know what this is, right? If you think about Isis in this moment, it might kind of be like how the Christians view, how ancient Greeks viewed the tears of Aphrodite for Adonis, right? Her lover. How Mary Magdalene or Mary the mother saw the death of Jesus, right? That you just can't understand how this character could die. They're gods. What does it mean when they die? Where do they go? And in Egyptian theology at this point, it wasn't set up what really happens in the afterlife in a concrete way that we would probably be able to understand. But what happens is Osiris' soul rests in the afterlife, a place where now he rules. And because of that, it's upon him to decide whether you get in. And of course, this is a great thing for humanity because he's a benevolent God. So he's going to be fair in terms of who gets to go to Rostro heaven and who gets to not. And I see nothing but transcendent love in the descriptions of Osiris and Isis as lovers in this moment of losing each other, probably forever. It's Osiris after this is described in some places to be kind of the wall that is within the wall, right? He is kind of the force that is within a force. He is within you in a way, and within himself in a way that he's totally comfortable, totally calm, and totally able, right? I think we can look at a lot of dying and rising gods in mythology and religion that in death they become invincible. In death they also become didactic and connective. They are now no longer just themselves. They are somehow within all of us, and they don't just inspire us. We can be them. We can channel them, right? Imagine if like you could channel Thor's hammer for a moment, or if you could channel Poseidon's trident, or you could channel Coyote's cleverness. Imagine if you could channel those things, and that's really what dying and rising gods do. They allow you to channel them in a way that removes you from damnation and forsakenness. To wrap this up, I think ancient Egyptian religion is so similar. If you read, what's his name? I think his name is E.A. Wallace or Willis Budge, and he wrote a book called Christianity Before Christ. And it's a very interesting take on Egyptian religion, how Egyptian religion is very much centered on the moral life of the person, and that you can transcend death. Sound familiar, right? That love really is the answer. Now, many people would say, oh, well, that's just coincidence, or that doesn't mean that it inspired anything. It doesn't really matter. Today, we can still access this information. So for the people who don't interact with religions that value love, like Buddhism or Jainism or Christianity, even Islam and Judaism, have have descriptions of the power of the sheer force of love from God. Someone who walks in the pyramids or goes to Egypt or Googles online, as I did when I was younger, and just is interested in just expanding their worldview, can see that in Egyptian religion, those same motifs exist and those same lessons exist. It's a beautiful thing to see the ancient mind going as far back as maybe 3200 BC, maybe even further, right? I mean, some people posit as, if you see on Ancient Aliens, the show, that Egypt, Kemet, could have been millions of years old, right? But still, to see the ancient person, what we would sometimes think is more primitive than us, really wrap their minds around the potential of a loving world, even if it has violence and chaos in it, right? Even if it has slandering and lies, if it has people that will not pass Osiris's test, as you might say, it is worth it because love exists and remains. And I think not enough mythology has that for us. You know, I always say that the religion that the ancient Greeks probably practiced was very local and regional. They probably had scriptures of the mystery religions, and it was probably just as dutiful as we are. We conceive that period as being a wanton period, worshiping a Zeus that's a maniac, and the Titans are from the Golden Age are trapped in the earth, and it's just kind of depressing and kind of dark, as I talk about in my book Reborn. But I think for the actual practitioner, those stories are for kids. You know, just like comics are for kids. And as you grow up, as I believe Paul says in his letters, you know, when I was a kid, I played with kid things, and as an adult, I move on. A very Stoic principle, right? A very Gnostic principle of transcending things. And so I think Egyptian religion transcends because it does teach about love, it teaches about family, connectiveness. The gods really do see themselves as a family, as a people with a duty, with a sense of pride to be stewards of the earth. Remember, Osiris is the one who teaches mankind how to farm, teaches them how to sing and music, Set teaches them how to fight, how to stand up against a great evil, even if you're not, you know, always the best person yourself. There's a moment of redemption. I think Isis teaches us the great potential and having women in your life. I think in whatever capacity, as a friend, as a lover, as a mother, as a sister, the great capacity of female intuition and female ambition and female, this what makes females special in a way that only females can be. I think Isis talks about that story, the sheer unwavering commitment to what she loves, despite Set hunting her, despite 72 others hunting her, despite Ra turning his back, the king of the gods, despite being pregnant with Horus. She will not relent, and I think that's unbelievable. So that's really my spiel on Egyptian religion. There's so many more stories. The stories of Hathor, the stories of and her rage. The stories of more stories of Isis, right, in her journey, post and pre Osiris. There's stories of Ra and Hatshepsut. There's so many. Bes is an interesting character, the dwarf god. So I urge you to look more into it. And if you're more interested in what I have to say, I have a podcast. It's called The Trend with Justin A.Williams. You can find that on Spotify. You can find that on Apple. You can also follow me on Instagram at Professor Jaws or Dubs Everlasting, Dubs with a Z. And please check out my book, Reborn: Virtues Constellation. It's a great book, and it's doing pretty well. But I'd love to get your feedback, reviews, anything, especially on these videos as well, if you enjoy them. Like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.